Nikki, hello. Jordan. Jordan is asking a question that we're going to get asked several times tonight on duplication of benefits. And Jordan, I'm going to answer it for you, and I have a feeling I'm going to be answering this again later. But here's the deal, Jordan. You are correct that on Tuesday last week, we had a conference call with Secretary Ben Carson, with his chief of staff, with the head of congressional affairs, with the acting assistant secretary, with the gentleman who is the career civil servant person who is in charge of the community development block grant program, particularly spending a lot of time lately on disaster recovery. The call, candidly, was pretty frustrating. We talked about two different things. The top thing, obviously, was duplication of benefits. The other one we talked about was $1.2 billion that we secured for the state of Louisiana for flood mitigation projects. This is in addition to the Comite, West Shore, Baton Rouge flood control, all those projects. So actually, I'm going to talk about that one real quick, and then I'll tell you about the other, just so you get an idea of the craziness. So of the $1.2 billion, under the law, it said that about a third of the money has to be available on April 1st of last year. It says that the rest of it has to be available by December 1st of last year. To date, zero, goose eggs, nothing is available because HUD has not written the Federal Register notice. We have actually exceeded 1 year since that bill was signed into law. It was February 9th, if I remember correct. So here we are 1 year later after these funds were appropriated, and they have not even published the notice in the Federal Register, despite the fact that the law said April and December is when these funds were supposed to be available. I don't know how in the world it takes a year to write a Federal Register notice whenever there have been similar programs in the past. You don't need to recreate the wheel. It's mitigation. We're not talking about nuclear physics. We're not talking about a flight to Mars. We're talking about mitigation. So I was not the only member of Congress on the call. While we were the ones who organized it and invited other folks, we had a number of other members of Congress on the phone, primarily interested in duplication of benefits because, Jordan, as we've discussed in the past, Louisiana, Texas, Puerto Rico, North Carolina governors have all sent letters asking for this, and we keep hearing that Florida and Virgin Islands are going to be doing it as well, but I haven't seen their letters, so I'm not certain if they've done it. So here's what the deal is. We made it clear to Secretary Carson that they were already operating outside the confines of the law, and that the funds should have been available by the third week in November. And we had all these bureaucratic explanations and excuses. It was incredibly frustrating. They tried to blame the government shutdown, and that might have been relevant if this wasn't due well before the shutdown. At the end of the day, Jordan, what you probably care about, the Secretary committed to have a final guidance issued by the end of April. So you may recall that before they told us it was going to be early April. Now they're saying the end of April. He committed that it would be done. We are having a weekly conference call with them just because of our sheer frustration. And I'm normally the one that's popping blood vessels and blood pressure going up and everything on these phone calls. But I got to tell you, we had some other members of Congress that did a fantastic job. It is clear they are approaching our level of frustration. Congressman Mark Meadows, for example, was on the phone, did a fantastic job conveying the frustration and how HUD needs to comply with the law. In any case, there's your answer, Jordan. End of April is what they're telling us. Let me say this one more time. The law fixed this. We passed this through the House 3 times before we get the Senate to act on it. The law was signed, the bill was signed into law in October. There were virtually no changes to this bill from when I introduced it back in November of 2017. There is no excuse for HUD to be taking this long. I think it is incredibly poor performance by their agency. We're not done in holding them accountable for that. The good news is that all 4 agencies that are involved, the Small Business Administration, the Office of Management and Budget, FEMA, and Housing and Urban Development, the attorneys from all 4 agencies have concurred that this fixes it, that the law has changed and solves the duplication of benefits problem. They're telling us now the end of April is when the guidance would be issued, and I remain confident that y'all are going to get paid. The money's already in the bank, has been in the bank for over 2 years now because we appropriated it for y'all back then. So So Jordan, long answer, there's your answer. If I didn't answer something, if I left something out, please hit me again and I'll go through. All right, is the clock running out for our DOB benefits and money going to the state instead of flood victims? Judy, no. I spoke to the governor on, let me get my days straight, on Friday. Talked to him on Friday. We talked about what the deal was, the timing and everything else. So let me say it again, $250 million, $250 million in funds. They're all federal dollars that we appropriated over 2 years ago for y'all. Those funds are still in the bank. They are escrowed or protected for duplication of benefits victims. I made it clear to the governor the timeline based on the call with Secretary Carson that we were expecting final guidance by the end of April. And so the governor's aware of that, and it's my understanding that the funds will remain protected until this is done, unless there's something crazy that happens. But that's the deal, and I will let you know if there are any changes. But Judy, I think your funds are protected. Richard, so what would be a good situation for term limits on Congress? Richard, I answered this 10 times last week. Happy to do it again. So the deal is that after being up here, it's pretty clear, just like I've talked about HUD ignoring the law, not once but twice. I've talked about the Corps of Engineers, FEMA, and other folks ignoring the law. One of the things I get worried about with term limits, if you just take members of Congress and term limit them, without term limiting some of these bureaucrats, you're going to further give the bureaucrats the upper hand because knowledge is power. Look, I've been here for since 2015, okay, 4 years, 2015. And gosh, I mean, just the acronyms, the bureaucracy, the alphabet soup that we deal with, there is so much just weeds of details with all these different agencies and programs. One of the biggest concerns I have is that if these federal bureaucrats are able to legalese or out detail members of Congress, then we're not going to be able to hold them accountable. So I'll say it again. I would support term limits under the right conditions. I think one of the most important things is that you also similarly term limit some of the bureaucrats that are there as well that do things like we're experiencing right now with duplication of benefits, like we're experiencing with the flood mitigation funds and other programs, as I said, Corps of Engineers, FEMA, and many, many others. So hope that was helpful. Nikki, Derek, when will we get guidance? Finally, we can expect the checks so we can put it to rest. If we're holding them accountable, what do we do about them taking so long? Yeah, Derek, so number one, I did give a big update on Jordan's question on this earlier. Timing right now, Secretary Carson told us on Tuesday last week it would be the end of April. The end of April. We are doing weekly phone calls with HUD to hold them accountable to the commitments that they made. But of course, when you're talking accountability, you're exactly right, meaning who are the people that have broken the law and how are they going to pay for ignoring the law and making up their own rules? And that is something that I'm working on with the House Oversight and Government Reform Committee. That's the committee that has primary jurisdiction over these types of issues. We're working on a solution. In fact, one of the committee members and I have had a couple of discussions. We're also working on a follow-up letter. But look, number one focus right now is getting the guidance out for this. And then once we get that, we absolutely will be working on the accountability issues. Derek, thanks. Let's see. Rachel, 2 long years, you bet. It sure is. Mandy, is it true that restore money is being divided up and distributed to different agencies and projects? Mandy, so we appropriated a total of $1.7 billion to restore. The restore program is all federal funds. They don't have a penny of state or local dollars in there. It's all federal funds that we secured in September of 16, December of 16, and a smaller piece in early 17, a smaller amount in early 17, 1.7 billion. So what happened is they submitted an initial plan and an amended plan, and since, I think, if I'm doing this from memory, I think since February of 17, I think they've submitted like 10 different amendments, and that's just changing things based on what they're seeing in reality, changing some of the spend plans. As they saw that there were substantial funds left over, they began expanding eligibility, adding new programs. So there are a number of amendments, and I think if you go to restore.la.gov, I think they have all that there. And so they have basically created new programs and divvied it out to different folks to administer. But I just want to reiterate, there is nothing that is right now threatening the duplication of benefits funds. Mandy, if that's what you're most concerned about. If not, let me know and I'll try and clarify. Julia, good evening. Thank you very much, Julia. Appreciate the kind words. Kathy, thank you. Derek, 3 years. Can you also comment on the false information about DOB funds being used for something else rather than just funding DOB? Yeah. So Derek, I think where the confusion came in was that there were changes to the state's action plan or spend plan. That's what they have to submit to HUD to approve spending of that 1.7 billion. So they did make some changes. They did add some new programs. They did expand eligibility for different things, including people who had flood insurance. But I just want to reiterate that so far, the nearly 250 million that were set aside for duplication of benefits victims, that remains in escrow. It remains lockbox protected for y'all. So I don't know where things got mixed up, but we have continued to make it clear to the state that we expect this to be settled, that they will have the eligibility. I even had a conversation with the governor on Friday about just sending the checks, and I've talked about that for months now. You know, I said, look, if I were governor, I would just send the checks because the law has been changed. And if HUD wants to come back and sue the state, sue them. Let them sue them, because I would love to go to court with HUD and let them try and tell us that what the state did was illegal. Bull. The state has every right. The law's been changed. All these bureaucrats have admitted it. So another conversation the governor I had on Friday was, you know, I said, look, I think you should just send the checks. But that's me, and he and I are different people. I'm not throwing him under the bus. It's just different styles. But we did have that conversation again on Friday because, like I said, it would be something to force HUD or prompt them, sue us. Go ahead and sue the state of Louisiana and try and allege that what we did was illegal. I would love to be in front of a judge and listen to them to try and explain themselves. All right, I'll take it down a notch. Bob, for those of us who gave Restore our SBA loan funds to meet the DOB requirements, are we going to get any of that back? All right, so let's see if we gave Restore our SBA loan funds to meet DOB requirements. Gosh, I'm not sure that I understand your question. So, so you were loaned money from the SBA, and you gave that to Restore? I don't think I'm aware of people that gave their loans to Restore, their SBA loans to Restore. Maybe if I'm misunderstanding, let me see if I can clarify. If you did get a loan through the SBA or you were approved for a loan through the SBA, whenever you applied for Restore, they probably sent you a letter saying, this is how much you're eligible for, but because of your SBA loan, this is all we're going to give you. So let's make up numbers. Let's say that they sent you a letter and said you're eligible for $50,000, but because you got a $42,000 loan through the SBA, we're only going to be able to give you $8,000. So what I'm saying is you should be eligible for that entire 42. Well, I'm sorry. Sorry. You should be eligible if you were given a loan for 42. You should be eligible for all 42, which would ultimately bring you up to the full 50. So you would get the $42,000, which is the same as you got in the loan, and then you already got the $8,000 in cash. So 42 and 8 is 50. So you'd be eligible for the whole thing. So sorry about my butchering that a little bit. I hope it made sense, and I hope it answered your question, Bob. If not, if you could just repost, I apologize, Laney.